I am a Care Bear. You know that.
Oh, I am only the most loving person in the world, and that is all that I am.
How many times have you overcome something in your life? Probably a lot. Probably far more than you've failed.
I'm so stupid. How can I not have those skills? Dumb for not getting skills that I didn't even know that I was going to need at this point in my life.
That's not building me up. That's just tearing me down.
Let's look at how I can reframe this language and say it to myself in a constructive way, the way that I would say it to a friend instead of how I have been talking to myself. Like I'm my own worst enemy. All right, so what really excites me about what we're talking about today is the fact that we have so many tools in this book, the Silence Your Inner Critic, which is this plethora, this guide that, we had to make certain that it had a lot of different tools for people because we're all multifaceted beings, right? As I've gotten to know you over these past 9 years, I know that you have so many different sides to you. Like you're not one-dimensional. You don't show up and it's like, oh, I am only the most loving person in the world, and that is all that I am.
I am a Care Bear. You know that.
I know you are. But you are so much more than that, too. You have depth. You're a cinematic adventurer, as you always talk about, which is why there's so much of that contained within the book, too. And so we had to make certain that we had a depth and a breadth of tools contained within that speaks to all the different facets of people too.
Yeah.
And so it was just important to us. Like for me, I am so heart-centered. I am all about love, but I'm also all about science and process and experimentation. And so I would have gone crazy if all I wrote about was, all right, here are the way that you feel into the feels as you silence your inner critic. Mm-hmm. It's important. We need that. But we also need these logical aspects, these ways to know, like, look, we're never going to completely kill off this inner critic. It is a part of our psyche. It is a part of who we are. So if we know the data is there, the research is there, we know it's an internal part of us that is biologically programmed. So then, knowing that data point, how then can we create experiments and tests and questions to become the observer that we can test out to find out what works for us? On the flip side of that, to at least begin to silence it, to begin to utilize it in our favor, even in some ways. And that's the whole point of this book.
I like it. I think it's important for all of us to understand that observer side of it, because when we choose to be the observer, it's us making an active and conscious choice to no longer be ruled by the inner critic. So we're creating that in a way, we're creating that separation that we talk about, that we are not the inner critic, that we can observe it, we can pull away from it and really begin, as you're saying, to utilize it as a tool versus being ruled or taken over by it or embody, which is where, trust me, I've been there, completely embodied by the inner critic, and it's like I'm a living inner critic. Instead of saying, no, that's not me. I'm not my inner critic. I'm not everyone else's thoughts and what I think everyone else thinks I should be. It's like, no, I am my own person. And so I feel like this is that one step and a logical one to get us out of that system that feels like it's like almost overwhelming with that.
Yeah. And if we're willing, like this whole point of growth, right, is that we recognize that we're multifaceted. Mm-hmm. And if in this process of silencing our inner critic, part of what we're doing is embracing that and being willing to maybe pick up one of these tools that maybe we wouldn't have picked up before and experiment with it to see if it's effective. Because most of us are going to we will gravitate toward what we're most comfortable with. It's normal.
Yeah.
It's like, I know how to do that, so let me use that. But if just once we're willing to gravitate towards something that we're a little not comfortable with, it's a little bit outside that comfort zone, then that might be the most effective tool that you'll utilize to actually begin to silence that inner critic. And sometimes that comes with what we're going to talk about now, which is being willing to have a set of questions that creates that gap or that distance, because we know we're not going to completely kill it off, right? It's a part of us. So if we have a set of questions that creates that gap where we can become that observer that we're talking about and observe that part of ourselves as though it's outside of us, then we now get this whole new perspective of what's causing it. And we have an opportunity to make a choice from that new perspective. And so we have 4 questions that empower you when silencing the inner critic. And you came up with like a shorthand for how to keep them really top of mind. Do you mind sharing what that shorthand is?
Yes, it's facts, friends, evidence, and purpose. And kind of now that we're thinking about it, it's almost like I love it's like mind the gap, you know. So like for those who are unaware, in England, it's really when getting onto the subway, you mind the gap, and it's like this is like your 4-car subway, right? And so you got your facts as 1 car, your friends as another, you've got your evidence, and then your purpose. And so this is kind of like your train to get you out of your head and into your heart. And so it's kind of like a cool tool that I think that it's very helpful for us when asking these questions, because when you're so in the inner critic and you're caught up in it, like it's when you're really in your head. And so it's just hard to just all of a sudden jump into your heart. It's like, I mean, we've had talks about that. It was like the first time you said, well, get in, go within, go into your heart. And I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, I don't even understand that. And so, but if you said, one of the ways to get there was to move into reflectiveness, right? Ask questions. And so that was like, okay, well, I'm not sure how to really fully use my heart right now, but I'm definitely aware of how to use my head. I'm definitely aware of, I'm very much overthinking. So why don't I just be focused with my thoughts? Why don't I be reflective with my thoughts and start to ask questions? And so these 4 questions are a great place to begin.
Yeah. It's part of a process or a tool that is called reflective questioning, which does drive you deeper and deeper within. And it's something, again, the scientific method is all about question everything. Yeah. And that includes us. Like, we have to be willing to question ourselves so that we clearly have an understanding and an awareness of why we believe what we believe. And that goes doubly for any critical thoughts that we begin to have about ourselves and within ourselves. And when we talk about the first question is facts, right? Let's dive into that first question. We start having critical thoughts that the inner critic is just spoon feeding us. We have to be willing to ask ourselves, are there any facts that support this thought that I'm having right now from this critical feed going through my brain over and over again? We've covered the whole negative brain bias. It's going to spin. That same negative thought, it's going to take hold, and then it's going to cycle, and it's going to cycle, and it's going to cycle. And a lot of times we don't even take the moment to step away and go, all right, what facts are present right now to support this negative thought? Whether it's, you don't have the skills to do that right now. Why do you think you can accomplish that? You don't have the skills. All right, so what facts are there to support that I don't have the skills to do this? Because if I look at the whole of it, I actually do. I have this that I have experience with. I have this that I have experience with. I have this that I have experience with. So if I actually look across, the facts support otherwise. I actually do have the experience. So now I can counter what is running through my head instead of embodying the false narrative that my inner critic is giving me and causing me to be frozen in fear that I can't do something. So be the detective and start going on that hunt and saying, give me the facts, really give me the facts. And then be willing to be open to the positive of that. Like, okay, no. But if for some reason you do find that there are facts to support that inner critical voice, then what are you going to do about it? How are you going to change it then? Don't just sit and go, oh, you're right. What that's telling you is that there's a facet of you that's pointing out a gap. So there's always these gaps, right? When we're saying mind the gap, okay, well then mind that gap. The inner critic has just given you a gift. It's just helped you level up and say, all right, well, apparently there's an area where I desire to grow. My inner critic just showed me that I don't have what I need to grow here. So what do I need to fill that gap so that I can get to the point where facts support that I can grow in this area? Right?
Brilliant. I think it's also a key factor to help people realize, because I don't think we take a lot of time to differentiate facts versus assumptions. Because oftentimes an assumption may feel like a fact, especially when there's an unresolved emotional tie to the assumption being like actually facilitating the inner critic.
Yeah.
Right. So if it's like, hey, I'm a failure. I'll never be as good as everyone else, or I'll never reach my goal. It's like, okay, sometimes when we're so caught in the inner critic, as you're saying, we're looking for reasons to support it. And so that's an assumption.
Yeah.
I mean, you're alive because you've accomplished things. Like, so you're where you're at because you've actually accomplished certain things in your life. Right. And it's easy to overlook those when it's not the one thing that we're looking for. And so oftentimes we just need to take that step back. And that's where this question is so important, to get us to reflect and be like, no, yeah, you're right. I have accomplished a lot of things to get to where I am today. And that way outshadows the things that I haven't accomplished. So how do I start to breathe that into what I truly desire right now? And I think that's so important. And so getting out of these assumptions of, I'll never get this done, or I'll never do this, or, negativity tends to be an assumption. But positivity can be an incredible conscious choice that actually really stems, I feel, deeply from the heart. Because when it's from the heart, I feel it's truth. And so if we can pull truth into it, then we're eliminating the assumption and we're pulling in the fact.
I love that. So what does Friends have to do with it? Like, it's not the TV show,
no.
obviously.
Unagi. This is important because we tend to be our harshest critic. And so the reason why we want to say the friends that are involved is like, is what you're saying what you would say to a friend? Like, how many times, I know me, I'm just going to say it's not to anyone else. For me, how many times I've called myself stupid or dumb or all these not nice things. Like, I wouldn't imagine calling someone else. Like, if someone does something and I'm not going to say, what are you, stupid? Because I say that to myself. I've been in that place where constantly, if I did something, I made a simple mistake. Gosh, I'm so stupid. Like, I know I'm not stupid. I don't think any of my friends would call me stupid. So why would I do that to myself? Why would I facilitate that type of conversation within myself? That's not building me up. That's just tearing me down. And that's not where I don't want to be torn down. I don't want anyone else to tear me down. So why would I want to tear down myself? Yeah. This goes back to, this is an assumption of when I am not a fact, right? And this is why it ties together. And I definitely wouldn't say that to a really good, a friend or really anyone. Like that's not, that doesn't feel right to me. And I don't like, the reality is, and the fact is that we all make mistakes, and we all have those moments where we don't feel like, oh, is this the smartest thing I've ever done? No, but that doesn't mean you're stupid.
Exactly. And even if you would say it to a friend, then how would you say it to a friend? Because we may say something to a friend that is an observation of an opportunity for growth, right? If we're a good friend, we might point out where there's an opportunity for a growth. But we're not going to say it in a harsh way or a cruel way. So if we go back to the facts, right? If there are facts that show that there's a gap, then are we going to say, I'm so stupid. How can I not have those skills? Dumb for not getting skills that I didn't even know that I was going to need at this point in my life. Stupid me. Well, I didn't know I was going to need them. So how does that make me stupid? That makes me actually really, really aware to be willing to take a step back and look at the facts of what's needed and then say, okay, I have an opportunity to grow here. So as my own best friend, I'm going to build myself up and say, yes, I have an opportunity to grow. Now, I know I can go get this. And I know that I have the intelligence and the complete wherewithal to make this happen. So what am I going to do about it? Instead of like, I would never look at you and go, Austin, how stupid of you for not knowing that you were going to need that 10 years later.
It sounds funny. Like just even to hear that, it's just like, it's silly.
But we do it to ourselves all the time. And so that's where the two linking together can come into play. And then you move into the evidence, right? Like evidence goes a bit with facts, but how can you pull evidence to counter the negative conversation that's going in your head? So not just looking at facts, because facts are like right there, they're the details, but you want circumstantial evidence as well. So look at circumstances. What are my circumstances and the evidence in those circumstances telling me? Is that supporting? Are there, beyond facts, details, are there circumstantial evidences that are saying to me that this is true or this is not true? And if all of the circumstances and the evidence, the circumstantial evidence is coming back to me and saying, this isn't true, then why am I buying into the false narrative? Or if all the circumstantial evidence is pointing out to me that this is true, then why am I placing myself into these circumstances? Or why am I creating these circumstances for myself? What am I attempting to show myself or teach myself so that I can move through them?
Right. Not get caught in the wheel or the cycle. How do I break out of it? So either way you win. And that's the important part of this. Most of the things that we're saying to ourselves is hyperbole, right? It's just grandiose words to make us feel bad. That's not even rooted in truth. So I think that's where the evidence part is really important as well. Kind of like what I was saying before. If I'm like, gosh, I'm such a failure. It's like, are you really? Like, how many times have you overcome something in your life? Probably a lot. Probably far more than you've failed. I mean, you're still standing here or sitting here. You're still alive. So you've overcome a lot of things just to be there right now. And so circumstance would say like, hey, you've overcome far more than you failed.
Yes.
And those failures were just perceptions. they were part of the process of overcoming. So there is not really a failure. There's only opportunities for growth and then movement forward, opportunities for growth and movement forward. And so the reality is no, you didn't fail. Maybe you missed. That's okay. We all miss, but that helps us get better. And so that to me is that evidence that we're looking for. So whatever we're seeking to actually accomplish, whether it's a goal, personal, business, relationship, whatever, just remember the circumstance. I think that's so important. And just remember the evidence that backs it up in the positive light, so that you can start to overcome the negative self-talk with that positive mental mind frame and recalibrate.
Yeah. Because ultimately, as you pointed out, if you take the time to look, the evidence from circumstances will likely show you have risen above things far more often than you've been swallowed up by things.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So, yeah. And the last question to hold in those memory banks to bring out when that inner critic rises up.
Purpose. What is the purpose of this right now? And I guess that could go in a lot of different ways. One is, what is the purpose of me saying negative things to myself? Well, there is no real purpose behind it. It's just a thing that we do. Okay, well, and I remember that idea. I remember when we talked about that. Like, why am I saying something negative to me? What is the purpose? I was like, I don't even know. There is no purpose. Then why am I spending the time in that area? Why am I actually putting the energy and effort? The amount of energy and effort I'm putting into my negativity, if even a portion of that was placed into the positivity, imagine what I could get done. Let alone if I started redirecting all of it into the positivity. I mean, that's where limitless nature then is fully expressed and experienced. And I think that's that gap that we're talking about, is the amount of energy that we're placing into the negativity and pulling ourselves down. We want to blame the outside. We want to blame everything around us. And I'm sure there are circumstances where that occurs, and I'm not putting anyone down for that. But a lot of it could be overcome because we're falling into it and we're actually digging ourselves deeper into it. So if we were to pull ourselves out of it and use that energy to pull ourselves out of it, imagine what we could experience. I think that's the aspect of purpose that I like to focus on with this question, regardless of what's going on around me.
Agreed. So in everyday scenarios, if you get to the point where you're mindful enough and you catch yourself and you realize that this inner critic is in there and is just beating you up, cycling through a negative thought over and over again, how do you pull these 4 questions out and just run through them in a way that helps you create that observational distance?
Great. The beauty that I feel about these 4 questions is that one leads to the others. Mm-hmm. So I would say, first and foremost, start with one that you gravitate towards, whether it's purpose, whether it's evidence, whether it's friends, whether it's facts, or the other way around, or any of them, whatever
works for you.
Whichever one specifically.
Seriously, however it works for you.
Yes. Start with one, because as this whole discussion that we're talking about, you could see the interwoven connection of all of them. And so one's going to lead to the next. So for me, the one that hit me the most was purpose, because I realized I have no purpose to talk negatively to myself. And so then that helped me understand the evidence, and then the facts, and then the friends. Yeah. It was like, that was kind of my process of the flow, because I could never find a true purpose. And I still haven't, and I probably never will find a purpose for me saying something negative about myself.
Yeah. What
in that
purpose
way,
does
or at
it
least to
serve?
pull myself down. Now, there is a purpose in being observational about myself to grow, which is different than tearing myself down just for clarity. And that was the understanding that helped me then become that observer, right? So there's no purpose in saying something negative about who I am or what I'm doing or why I'm doing it. It's just an observation to give me that clarity. Okay, what is the purpose behind whatever action then? So therefore, I'm not the action, because that can be changed. And therefore, I can be changed. And therefore, I can continue to grow. And so that sets me up for what I feel is that positive mental mind frame. It moves me into putting all my energy into something that isn't going to serve me.
Yeah. And it's funny because for me, in the everyday, I actually begin with facts, because as heart-centered as I am, and let me tell you, you said you're a Care Bear, I am like, what? Love is everything. But if I'm looking to get the observational distance, I know that I need a little bit of distance from that feel. And the best way for me to do that is to start with facts. I need to separate emotion and feeling so that I can get that clarity. And I begin looking, all right, what are the facts? What is causing this to rotate around in my mind? There has to be something going on right there. So let's look at the facts of the situation that's causing this to enter into my mental model. Then I can begin to go into evidence. All right, what circumstantial evidence may have sparked these thoughts that have these facts in place? Then I can move into, that's given me the distance now. I can begin to really look at things. Then I can understand purpose, because obviously there's a purpose. I started creating negative words about myself so that I could understand something was going on, because I don't usually talk negative to myself. I've reached that point. But man, there must be something going on where my inner critic has found a way and created a crack in my foundation. So let's find out what that purpose is. I've got the facts, I've got the evidence. Let's figure out the purpose. And now let's start constructing how I would say this to a friend now, instead of how I'm saying it in how I have been saying it to myself, because how I have been saying it to myself is not very nice. So now that I have all of that information, let's look at how I can reframe this language and say it to myself in a constructive way, the way that I would say it to a friend, instead of how I have been talking to myself, like I'm my own worst enemy. And then that allows me to build that out. But that's why it's so important. That is honestly, guys, why it's so important that we all look at things from our own point of view. Because as you just heard, Austin very much looks at it from a very different standpoint than how I do. And you're going to incorporate these 4 questions in a very, very different way than either of us do. So take these tools and these resources and figure out how they blend for you.
I agree. Can we take a quick moment for those who may be just catching us for the first time here, or maybe they've just recently caught us? Because you brought something up that's really important that I know the first time I heard it, I was kind of like, my mind went blank. And I was kind of deer in the headlights. When you brought up separating feelings from emotions.
Oh, yeah.
So it's yeah. let's unpack that one.
Let's take a moment to unpack that one.
Yes.
Yes. And it's a question that a good friend of mine, Corey, and I were just talking about as well, because it does get so blended in together. Our emotions are tied to that instinctual moment that we have. And so when we have something occur, we have an emotional response to it. And it is very physiological, right? So when you meet someone that you like and your heart starts racing and you have that emotion of, oh, I really like this person, that is an emotion. Now that emotion is going to translate eventually into a feeling. So that feeling may last and you're going to build upon that emotion. But that initial trigger is an emotion. When you have anger, boom, that's an emotion because it's an instantaneous thing. But if you allow that emotion to sit with you, then eventually that anger is going to turn into hatred, which is a lasting feeling. But if you take the time to process that emotion, the initial emotion of it, real time, or at least within a period of time, then you have an opportunity to not let that initial emotion sit and become a lasting feeling that you may not desire to carry with you. And that is part of what the inner critic, again, really loves to hold on to if it is an emotion that is a heavier emotion, right? Especially like anger. Yeah. Or if we have fear-based emotions, right? Like anxiety is a key feeling that results a lot from those initial emotions where confusion is an emotion. I have a lot of confusion. So if we don't take the time to navigate through the feelings of confusion, then suddenly they sit and they become anxiety, right?
That's a great explanation. Thank you for that. I think it's so important. I know when you first explained that to me, it was just like crazy. Like that's just mind-blowing, but also heart-opening. And it just kind of led. I know where you're going, and I was very impressed that you stood with your idea instead of going like the Star Wars Yoda, anger leads to hate. In other words, like fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and hate leads to suffering. Yeah. In the as you were talking about that, I was like, wow, there's so much truth in that, because when we are stuck in the inner critic, it is suffering at our own peril. And it's just, and that's why I go back to, for me, purpose is such a key aspect. I don't have a purpose behind making myself suffer. I really don't. That's the opposite of what I desire to experience in my life. And so that's why for me, it hits home. And that's like why I gravitate towards that specific one for me. And so I think that's kind of like your homework, I guess, for anyone listening today is like, see which one of these four really connects with you, and just test them out. Maybe do one a week and see, maybe make a journal or just kind of reflect on these reflection questions and really just see if one of them really connects with you, and you notice a complete difference in the way that you interact when you start using this question, then that's your one. That's your go-to. And so I think that's just kind of the homework that we'll leave you with, if you will, or the heart work, I guess. Yeah,
heart work. We'll call it heart work. And if this is your first time joining us, we are grateful to have you with us. If you've been with us the entire time, we are so grateful for that as well. We are the Heart Leader podcast. If you haven't caught that, I am your host, Amber, and I've been here with Austin. And if you haven't had an opportunity yet to fully explore our channel, we would highly recommend that you do so. We have so many tools and resources available here, wherever you are listening to us. So many previous podcasts that share resources. So if you have a moment, take a little journey and maybe hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes. We are also offering 20% off of a book that we have coming out called Silence Your Inner Critic. So if you are interested in getting all of the tools and resources that are available on that at 20% off when we launch, head on over to silenceyourinnercritic.com, and it's a really easy sign up. Plus, you'll get a bonus. We have a workshop that's one of our best-selling workshops, actually, that we're going to give you for free. It is the mirror technique, and it comes with a lot of information and videos and a great opportunity to really see yourself with loving eyes, which really silences that inner critic. Until next time, please take all the time that you need to post below and share your comments and build out this community so that we can begin to get to know one another and support and help one another on this journey of bringing our heart and our mind into alignment. Until next time, Austin and I look forward to seeing and chatting with you in the community.